Thanks for joining us on the program, everyone. We're keeping tabs on events and happenings in the polity. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. You can join the conversation right now on X, formerly Twitter, using the hashtag Beyond100Days. Let's begin with an update for you from the Kaduna Governorship Election Petition Tribunal, where 2 of the 3 tribunal judges have declared the elections inconclusive, citing an imbalance between the number of permanent voter cards received and the lead margin of over 10,500. 2 of the 3 tribunal judges also found that the preliminary notice was filed out of time, deeming it abandoned. Consequently, a rerun has now been mandated in 22 polling units spanning 7 wards across 4 local government areas to be completed within 90 days. However, the lead judge, in delivering his judgment, upheld the election of Obasani and the APC, diverging from the perspectives of the other 2 judges. We're following that story closely, with both councils having different interpretation of the judgment, and we'll bring you more details subsequently. Also, the Attorney General of the Federation, Lateef Fagbemi, has asked the organized labor to respect the 5th June order issued by the National Industrial Court restraining both Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress from embarking on any industrial action over fuel subsidy removal and related issues. In a letter to the NLC and TUC and Femi Falana, the AGF says the plan by both labour bodies to embark on indefinite strike from 3rd October is a violation of the subsisting order and a disregard to the dignity and integrity of the court. He urged Mr. Falana to prevail on his clients to respect the order of the court and allow room for ongoing negotiations between the parties on how to address the challenges associated with the full subsidy removal. The 2 leading labor unions in Nigeria early on Tuesday declared an indefinite nationwide strike beginning from 3rd October. NLC had earlier embarked on a 2-day warning strike with a 21-day working day ultimatum for government to engage in concrete and meaningful dialogue in the interest of the people. The ultimatum expired last Friday, and the Congress is set to take action, has already taken action, and has decided for a full-blown exercise in the area of a strike action from the 3rd of October. The TUC earlier on insisted it wasn't time for such an action, but in a dramatic turn, we saw them earlier this week, alongside with the NLC being on the same page. Our attention on the show this evening is turned to the security situation in southern Kaduna, which have now, over the years, recorded bitter experiences of violent conflicts in various forms. On Tuesday, at least 6 people were killed by armed terrorists in the Takena community of Atyak Chiefdom, that's in Zango Kataf local government area. A relentless wave of violence continues to grip the region, casting a long, dark shadow of fear and uncertainty. Our correspondent captured the situation in this report.
A somber cloud has settled on the once serene village of Takane, located within the Atyak Chiefdom of Zango Kataf local government area of Kaduna State. 6 individuals, including 2 innocent children, fell victim to a recent act of terror perpetrated by suspected armed bandits. This assault, which took place on Tuesday night, stands as the most recent in a string of brutal attacks on communities within the state. Reports indicate that the assailants infiltrated the village around 7 p.m. Samson Marcos, the acting secretary to the district head of the community, recounted that the terrorists indiscriminately unleashed gunfire, claiming the lives of 4 individuals in one compound and 2 in another. Heartbreakingly, among the casualties were 2 children. This incident closely follows a prior attack just 5 days ago in Kaura, where a woman lost her life and 2 of her children were abducted. This serves as a solemn reminder of the pressing need for unified efforts to ensure the safety and security of communities in Kaduna State. As Takane and its neighboring communities grapple with this heart-wrenching tragedy, profound questions emerge. How can we protect the sanctity of life in a time where such brutal acts disrupt the peace? This is a query that resonates not only in rural communities in Kaduna State, but reverberates in the hearts of all who yearn for a nation liberated from such violence. Lupe Asom, TVC News, Kaduna.
I'm joined now by clergyman and co-director, Interfaith Mediation Center of the Muslim Christian Dialogue in Kaduna, Reverend James Kuye. Also joining us to discuss the Southern Kaduna security situation is Country Director, International Alert, Paul Oyolaku, who was conflict advisor at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, Nigeria, and taught peace and security studies at the University of Port Harcourt. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the program. Let's begin with Reverend Kuye. You are not new to the Southern Kaduna crisis. In fact, yours is a very inspiring story of the huge sacrifices or loss that you suffered during an interfaith violence in Zango Kataf. And now you're working together across the divides to build bridges between communities with the Interfaith Mediation Center. How do you feel hearing that Zango Kataf is back in the news for the wrong reasons? And do you think these new attacks share any similarities with the one you experienced yourself?
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share again some of the thoughts and feelings and reflections that we have had over the years regarding conflict progression and the issues around not allowing the cycle of violence to stop. I remember about 2 years back, we made an intervention in Southern Kaduna where we said that Stop the Killing was hashtagged. Unfortunately, that was also led by by now, of course, the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Christian Commission. My colleague and I, Imam, were there to facilitate the healing process. Now, coming to how the dynamics now, the change in the style of violence and killings, they are not the same as it used to be during my time, and how, unfortunately, I sustained injury as a result of my then efforts to protect the church from those who were out to attack Christians. And my colleague also was out to do that on the Muslim side. But the issues now is embedded in using ethnicity, religion, and branding, and also profiling certain individuals as perpetrators of evil. It's unfortunate that this killing has refused to stop in spite of various efforts by various people to do intervention. So the difference here is this. The attacks these days are hinged on what people perceive as a deliberate attempt by some powers, maybe non-state actors, to dislodge. When you speak with the people, they say it's all about land grabbing, land annexation, instilling fear. Of course, issues around politics where people are also perceiving that some state actors may have hand in what is happening. And then you find out that when conflicts are resolved, agreements are reached, it seems some people from somewhere else will come and breach the peace. When you are building trust among the people, somebody comes to break that trust. So the dynamics of now is that the perpetrators on this side, on the other side, are perceived to have come from a particular ethnic nationality. And this ethnic profiling is not good for conflict resolution. So we feel strongly that those people coming from this ethnic nationality that are perceived to have belonged to a particular faith, given that coloration, people are also interpreting the faith component into it. Otherwise, I see this as pure criminality, attack on vulnerable people, which does not have a lot of religious coloration, but ventilations by state actors seems to exacerbate on the situation. And
I hear you, Reverend. We're going to get back to the colors of ethnicity and religion that has followed this crime over the years. But let me quickly hear from Mr. Oyolaku. Some 3 years ago, the Buhari presidency described why the violence and killings in Southern Kaduna have persisted. And the spokesman was quoted to have said, this is due to evil combination of politically motivated banditry, revenge killings, and mutual violence by criminal gangs acting acting on ethnic and religious grounds. How important is understanding the real cause of this problem to attaining peace and security in that region?
Yeah, thanks very much. Reverend Wuye has helpfully laid out, the trajectory of this conflict, of the attacks in southern Kaduna, as beginning with religion. Kaduna has been really plagued by these conflicts, religious conflicts, and recently, with what we're seeing in southern Kaduna, is criminal attacks against, communities on both sides. So the violence is widespread. The causes of the violence, as you have alluded, can be attributed to a range of causes. And it's a very complex issue that requires us to reflect on these conflicts very closely to see exactly where the issues are coming from. But as the case is in several other parts of the country, and even with the banditry in the Northwest affecting Kaduna as well, I would say that these conflicts begin as, small level community disputes that are then unresolved and then become something really complex, evolve and escalate into something really very complex. Because one form of conflict can lead to another. And as we see in the Northwest and it's in southern Kaduna, some people will refer to it as a conflict situation. But if you go to the indigenous people, they will tell you that these are just criminal attacks against our communities. But the big question now is why these criminal attacks are happening, and is there really nothing that can be done to stop it? I would say that the issue of protection of civilians in southern Kaduna particularly, and in all other parts of the country, has become really very critical, that the sense in which we understand the root causes of the conflict is at the heart of its resolution. But there has been a securitized approach to these issues, as to try to stop the violence from going on without looking at the very root causes for why they are happening. Could it be the issue around land? Could it be the issue around religion? Could it be the issue around, unprovoked attacks, by either groups? This is really context specific, but an attempt needs to be made, and sustained for understanding this crisis and then seeing how we can deal with it through a range of approaches. So it doesn't need to be either a security response or a non-security response or non-cohesive response or a peace-building approach. We need to begin from a place where we understand what the key issues are, who are the key actors, how can civilians be better protected, those who have suffered losses, how can we offer some kind of compensation, how can we establish a sustainable reconciliation process for Kaduna? Kaduna is a state that worries a lot of people in terms of how balkanized the state has become, in terms of how unsafe people from different ethnic groups or different religions feel in other parts of the state. And so this is a worrisome situation for cohesion. Cohesion for Kaduna is a big issue, that draws huge lessons for how we even take the issue of national cohesion forward in Nigeria.
Shortly, we'll get to what we can do to enhance peace and security in that area. But let me get back to the Reverend very quickly. You mentioned that the latest attack is purely economic, land grabbing, and it is crime that now has ethnic and religious coloration. But is there a sense to which, Reverend, you think there is still more work to be done in the area of interfaith and ethnicity mediation? How much gap do you think still exists in that regard after these years?
Thank you again. Breaking the cycle of violence is a task that must be undertaken by both state actors and non-state actors. Healing takes place gradually, but in the course of healing, if anger is ventilated or people perceive that deliberate attacks are done on them, it brings back again the pains. And we do have what we call passive historical injustices. We have collective unhealed memories. We have the pains that of course, political undertone in terms of the perception of people of that section, which helps to aggravate and make people ventilate anger beyond proportion. The issue of interfaith is imperative, but there is the need, first of all, to do an intra-faith dialogue with the perceived residents of Southern Kaduna. That is to say, all other people. There are certain institutions that were proscribed by the former government of Kaduna State, the Southern Kaduna People's Development SUKAPO, and the need to do a dialogue with them, to do a dialogue with all the other relevant Southern Kaduna ethnic groups that belong to other religious persuasion, to see how we can say, where do we stop the violence?
Talking about dialogue, Reverend Kuye, you know that dialogue has been, a recurring decimal in this regard. In fact, we have talked about white papers year in and year out. What do you think? Why is dialogue not working? Because you are calling for more dialogue, but there are stakeholders who would also tell you that they've been talking along different lines.
Yeah, it's better to shed a drum of sweat than to allow a pint of dialogue, a pint of blood to drop. So dialogue can never be exhaustive, because without dialogue, it means we should clench our fists and continue the competition on who killed the most. The issue is that there is a need now for sincere dialogue among all stakeholders. And of course, when we superimpose dialogue on faith, in most cases, Nigerians are very religious, but I want to say not all Nigerians are very godly. It's one thing to be religious and another thing to be godly. So if we superimpose our dialogue on the divine structures, then we can have results. I think it is time for religious leaders to be on the front line. Religious leaders that have been properly deprogrammed, those who view things objectively, not because I come from a particular place, but because people are dying. The cost of lives, one life, the cost of property that are being destroyed, necessitate the imperativeness of doing this dialogue on the intra, on the inter, to ensure that also we need the political will of the government. We do hope that governments coming will now give in their political will, both in the state and the surrounding states. You should know that everything that happens within the Southern Kaduna has the capacity to escalate across border. So we have cross-border violence. It is also, there are blame games among communities that are saying, oh, these people attack us here and run to that other side. And they are seeing brothers and sisters who hitherto were comrades, but now suspicion has stepped in, have dropped in. So I want to critically say dialogue is important, dialogue should continue, and let's intensify this dialogue. Not to just do it once and then go out. No, follow through the agreements and ensure you keep reminding the people of those agreements that they have agreed upon and keep working on it. It can never end, and
I hear you,
violence
Reverend.
does not end in a day.
Yeah, so if we all agree that this is crime, then we also have to punish crime. The situation where a crime is committed and it feels that some people, go scot-free, when there's no sense of justice, it explains why the problem persists. But let's talk to Mr. Yukalu, because you were in Kaduna yourself in April, where you mentioned that political grievances were the drivers of social unrest in Nigeria. I'm wondering if you were referring to the Southern Kaduna situation. And add to that is also how you think good governance can, help in the peace process in that part of the country.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, so it's a myriad of factors, actually, political grievances being part of it. And so when we say political grievances, it doesn't necessarily mean grievances related to elections. It also has a lot to do with the involvement of people in decision-making processes. So in Kaduna, for example, you would have certain sections of the state who have, been crying out loud around discrimination discrimination and marginalization? Are those issues that we need to put on the front burner? Are we able to open up broader level conversations to understand what people are grieved about, whether it's political, whether it's about their involvement in decision-making processes, whether it's about their inclusion in government? All these are factors that continue to worsen and fuel, the existing situation on the ground. But again, as I mentioned earlier on, there are a myriad of factors. Are we looking into economic issues? Are we looking into the rising levels of unemployment? If you go to the streets, you'll find so many young people who are just waiting for the slightest provocation to pick up their arms and start attacking other communities. Are we looking at these as factors that drive the violence as well? The sociocultural issues? How do people feel a sense of being part of the state or not? So these are very critical issues. We need to look through a range of these factors and then begin to find ways for which dialogue can be sustained. So the question you raised earlier on, whether we can get to a point where violence is okay, I think Reverend James Weah had mentioned that very clearly, that for peace processes, for example, we continue to work at it. There's never a time when you should feel that you have done well enough, for peace to be sustained over a longer period, because the society is dynamic. Conflict is an existential part of our existence, and so it will always happen. But what we must always continue to establish mechanisms and systems and processes to avoid is that these disagreements and grievances, when they happen, shouldn't become violent. But the problem we have faced, across several attempts that have been made to deal with these issues, not only in Southern Kaduna, but across the country, is that when certain agreements are reached, are they kept? Who are the people in the room representative of, all these different groups that seem to be aggrieved? Do we have some elite groups who claim representation and at the end of the day don't actually put the real issues on the table? These are critical issues to think about, and a broader range of stakeholders need to be brought into this conversation. It's not a government-only conversation. It needs to be multi-track. It needs to involve the academia through research. It needs to involve civil society. It needs to involve religious leaders. It needs to involve the private sector, who are the greatest beneficiaries of peace. It needs to involve faith communities. It needs to involve a broad range, community leaders, traditional leaders. All these different groups of stakeholders need to come together. And I totally agree that a security response is necessary, at least so that there will be some condition, there will be some, condition that allow dialogue to happen. But we don't necessarily need to rely on that as the only solution. We need to continue to understand the causes of these grievances and then make concrete efforts to deal with it. So we never get to a point where we say, we have dealt with any issue, because peace is a process and we must continue to work at it and never relent in our effort to ensure sustained peace and stability. You mentioned earlier on the idea around justice. So what does justice really mean to these people? We need to understand what it is. And what type of justice do we offer them? Do people even know what channels are there for them to seek redress and to have justice? Now, whether this justice is local or traditional or transformative or transitional, we need to begin from a place where what can we do to ensure that people feel a sense of redress? And how can we ensure that accountability is established and that there is a sense where people do not feel that they can carry on with these attacks with impunity? I think these are the critical questions that we need to continue to reflect on, whether as government or as different key stakeholders that are involved in this process across these areas that are affected.
And gentlemen, that's our time. We'll return subsequently to explore more dimensions to this conversation. Paul Yulaka is Country Director with International Alert. Thank you for joining us on the program this hour. We've also spoken with clergyman and co-director Interfaith Mediation Center of the Muslim Christian Dialogue in Kaduna, Reverend Dr. James Marvel Wuye. Reverend Wuye, you probably will return to talk to us about forgiveness, because your story about walking hand in hand with people you once fought with is quite interesting. Gentlemen, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you for having us, but I would like to say that We have a standing committee now for the peace in Southern Kaduna, constituted by Reverend Dr. Palm and his team. And they are working, cutting across religious leaders, community leaders from all the tribes and communities in Southern Kaduna. I hope the government of the day will give them the necessary support to ensure that peace is restored permanently in Kaduna. And thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to talking about my story of forgiveness. And Paul is a great friend. Paul, thank you. And it's nice seeing you on this platform.
Absolutely. We'll get back to that subsequently. That's our program today, everyone. You can watch it again at midnight and at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I'm back at 7 p.m. with more stories for you. I am Nifemi Oguntoye.